Morant with a running start. Elevate! Oh, it dunks! Oh, my goodness!
Tie game in overtime. Gasol will turn. His heat is gone! Memphis on top. 7-10 remaining. Conley now with three. Count it! A 15-point lead for Memphis. And Blake Griffin gets into it on the floor with Randolph. Hard to tell if there are any punches being thrown under there, but Griffin took acceptance.
Adams going long. Morant! He hit it! John Morant, insanity!
You gotta be kidding me.
Welcome to Grits and Grinds, a Memphis Grizzlies podcast. My name is Keith Parrish. On today's episode, I'm going to answer a few listener questions. These were questions submitted through social media, many of them having to do with trades and the Grizzlies offseason, also their current roster. So I'm going to get right into it. I don't know how many of these questions I will be able to answer, but let's start with these two questions, actually. We'll kind of tie them together. The first question is from Carlos. He asks, would you rather go for a big swing move like Kevin Durant or a move like adding Herb Jones? The next question is from Tyler. He asks, should the Grizzlies trade one or two of the big three to get Durant or Giannis? Now, I tied those together because they're asking about some big trades, like making a move for Kevin Durant or Giannis. The Giannis one, very interesting because some betting markets have the Grizzlies as one of like the 4 or 5 most likely teams to acquire Giannis, to be Giannis's next team. But I need to remind you, those betting markets are essentially meaningless when it comes to stuff like this, especially with how long those odds are. So let's go back to Carlos. Would I rather the team go for a big swing move like Durant or a move like adding Herb Jones? Between those two options, I would say I'm more interested in adding Herb Jones. I was incredibly interested in adding someone like Kevin Durant or Jimmy Butler if that player could be added to our current big three. Like I thought last year or the year before, if we traded Marcus Smart plus Luke Kennard plus Brandon Clarks, the salaries add up. You could get there, and thus you could add one of those players to your current big three. Then Desmond Bane could be your 4th best player. Jaren could be your 3rd best player. The hierarchy of the big three would be adjusted. The idea of adding a player better than all our current players seems amazing. That seemed amazing. That seemed like how you would build a title team. Now, I think that time has passed. I don't see any way that that move could happen. Now, to make the matching salary, you essentially have to include one of the big three. And so, because of that, I'm not as eager to trade for Kevin Durant if it means giving up, say, Desmond Bane. I don't think we're talking about trading Jaren or Ja Morant. Of course, there's issues with trading Jaren. Like, even if you wanted to trade Jaren for Kevin Durant, first of all, the matching salary doesn't work at all because Jaren's only scheduled to make $23 million, of course, next season. That's why we've had all this conversation in the offseason about Jaren possibly getting this renegotiation and extension. Well, if he gets traded to the Suns, even if you could do that matching salary-wise, the Suns can't renegotiate and extend Jaren, so that doesn't work. So I don't know how much closer trading Desmond Bane for Kevin Durant gets you when you also weigh in whatever future assets are probably likely to be included in a trade that was Desmond Bane for Kevin Durant. I mean, Kevin Durant in the last year of his deal and obviously is aging. I mean, the Suns would do that, I think. Even if, some people complain about Desmond Bane's contract size, the Suns would do that. So maybe you don't even have to add a future pick. But I'm not ready personally to short circuit this big three and to go for a more short-term solution like Kevin Durant. So I am not as interested in that move. Now, before I get to the Herb Jones talk or a smaller move, then let's go over to Tyler's question asking, like, would we trade a big three guy for Durant or Giannis? Now, Giannis, I mean, that's a different question because Giannis is MVP level where Kevin Durant is not. Giannis, I mean, might optimistically have like 3 more seasons at an MVP level. Making a pivot to trying to get Giannis, I mean, that would be something for the Grizzlies. You would have to include, I think, so many picks to make this happen. You also would have to, you could include Bane plus Edey plus like a small contract. That would match the contracts. Maybe you didn't like me throwing in Edey right there. Bane plus Brandon Clark, that would get it there as far as the salary matching. Like, what does a Ja Morant, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Jaren Jackson Jr. core, what does that get you? How does that stack you up in the West? I mean, I think it makes you one of the best teams in the West. It is not, I would say, it's not an ideal pairing. Ja and Giannis, both limited outside shooters. It's not an ideal pairing. Also, if you still have Zach Edey, I'd say Zach Edey, Jaren Jackson Jr., Giannis as like a 3-4-5. Also not perfect if you were building the ideal team in a lab, but it would be better. It would be really, really good. They could figure some stuff out, but like, is that the all-in move I want? I mean, I guess if they did trade for Giannis and it was like, let's try to imagine what it would be. Let's say Jaylen Wells is included. Jaylen Wells plus Desmond Bane plus John Conchar. And I think we need one more contract in there. And then you're also throwing in what? 4 first-round picks? 3 first-round picks and 2 swaps or something? Is this the all-in move you want? Like, how well is Ja Morant's game going to age? Ja and Giannis, maybe 3 years from now, is that a good team? Are you trading all that stuff for this, all-in move for the next few seasons? It's an interesting concept. It's not one I'm that into. I've slightly resigned myself to taking the wait and see approach. Maybe it's seeing the Indiana Pacers make the NBA Finals. Maybe it's looking at the rest of the West and being like, despite getting swept by the Thunder, Grizzlies are pretty well set up. We see a lot of other teams are probably going to take a step back. The second apron, the first apron, the luxury tax issues, they seem to be very restrictive to team building league-wide. Seems like a lot of other NBA ownership groups are comfortable with the idea of being like, you know what? There's more parity and we're not going to pay luxury tax and we're just going to see what happens. If that is the future landscape of the league, and it might not be, I'm still hesitant to draw any conclusions specifically about the Thunder and Pacers both making the finals. Thunder, of course, are a stacked, loaded team, but both those teams not paying luxury tax. I think the Pacers' success story this year, to me, it's more of an aberration than a blueprint for what's going to keep happening in the NBA. Maybe I'm wrong, but having a team without a clear-cut top 10 guy make the NBA Finals feels random, not a sign of what things are to come. But would I make a trade for Giannis if it was all my future draft picks and then Desmond Bane? And again, it wouldn't be Jaren because Milwaukee couldn't sign Jaren to an extension. I mean, maybe it's cleaner to have Ja and Desmond and Giannis. That makes more sense on paper if Zach Edey's sticking around. But of course, again, then you run into the matching salary issue, and then you run into the fact that the Bucks wouldn't be able to sign Jaren to an extension, so they probably would not do this deal. Now, I will say, Giannis does have a tie to professional sports in Tennessee. I don't know if you all know this, but he is a minority owner of the Nashville Soccer Club. He is an investor along with his brothers in the Nashville Soccer Club. So maybe Giannis would be down with coming and playing with Ja Morant on the Grizzlies. I think it's highly unlikely, of course. And I don't think it's necessarily something I would do if it meant basically sending every pick the Grizzlies have and either, Desmond Bane or Jaren, maybe if you could add up the money. I mean, if we're playing 2K, the move I think would be to trade Ja Morant for Giannis, and then you search for a point guard because I think keeping around the shooting of Desmond Bane would be important. Giannis plus Jaren plus Desmond Bane, that's pretty special. But of course, we're not playing a video game. Ja Morant's too popular, too exciting. I don't think the Grizzlies would trade him. I don't think the Bucks would even do it because they have Damian Lillard, and they don't really want to, they probably want to tear down totally, get some of their own first-round picks back from the Pelicans, so no reason to really talk about it. But that is my opinion on those big trades. Now let's go back to Carlos's first part of his question, where we talked about if I wouldn't want to make a big swing for Kevin Durant, would I make a move for Herb Jones? Of course, Herb Jones would be an amazing get for this offseason. I'm very interested in bringing in a guy like Herb Jones. Now, despite the fact that there's been reports the Pelicans are listening on everyone on the roster, that no one is untouchable, I don't think it's incredibly feasible that the Grizzlies would meet the asking price for Herb Jones. I think if I'm the Pelicans, I'm going to ask for a ton for both Herb Jones and Trey Murphy. Trey Murphy starting a 4-year extension that is, I think, incredibly reasonable. That would be an amazing get for the Grizzlies. I think also appealing for the Grizzlies, like Herb Jones fits great, good defender, does have some injury concerns, but he could play the 3 probably alongside Jaren and Zach Edey. You could match his contract with just like John Conchar plus Jay Huff. That'd be enough. But then, like, what's the acquisition cost? Do 2 first-round picks get it done? I might be down with that. If you're thinking you need to make a more aggressive move this summer, all right, would you trade 2 first-round picks for Herb Jones? I mean, does that count as a big swing move? I mean, Carlos set up the question with, would you do a big swing move like Kevin Durant or a move like adding Herb Jones? I guess now I would clarify, or I'd explain my opinion that making a move for Herb Jones would also be a big swing because it would cost a lot. I think that my conclusion from the end of the year that I've stated before on the show and where I'm at right now, I am in more of a wait and see mode with the Grizzlies. I don't think I would be that aggressive this offseason making a trade where I'm sending out a lot of firsts. Like my goals, if you told me that the team was going to do something this offseason, my goals are kind of the same goals I've always had. It's go get someone like Cam Johnson or someone like Andrew Wiggins. You actually could get there by swapping some salaries around. Initially, I was thinking it would be pretty hard, but one thing the Grizzlies could do, and this is complicated, of course, by Jaren's contract situation. Everyone talks about like, oh, we can dump John Conchar's money and then give Jaren his renegotiation. I don't see how they're going to dump John Conchar's money. There's not that many teams. I mean, there are teams that could take him into like a trade exception or the mid-level exception or the taxpayer exception, but no team's just going to take him. Even if a team out there was really interested in the idea of having John Conchar, their GM's like, we got to get that guy. He's great. And even if that was the case, they still know they would be doing the Grizzlies a huge favor by taking him. So the negotiation would be, well, I'm not taking John Conchar off your hands for nothing and not giving you any salary back in return. You have to give us something. So I'm not that into the idea of salary dumping John Conchar. I mean, maybe you do it if it's the only way to keep Jaren around or to get him on that extension. But anyways, I'm saying all that because John Conchar's matching salary, I think, could end up being important because John Conchar, you can trade him out and bring back a guy actually making over $13 million, and you can start stacking contracts that way where you could trade John Conchar. I was just looking at this. You could trade John Conchar for, say, Grant Williams. Grant Williams had a knee injury last year. He signed for 2 more seasons. Maybe the Hornets would do that just for free. They'd say, yeah, we'll do a 1-for-1 John Conchar for Grant Williams. So you could trade that, bring in the extra money of Grant Williams. Of course, to do this, you'd already need to sign Jaren to his extension because if you did make that move, that would eat up your cap space. So let's just say somehow they work out an extension with Jaren, or let's just say they decide not to do it. Then you could trade John Conchar's money for Grant Williams' money. Then you could actually trade out Grant Williams' money for, you could trade it for Cam Johnson straight up because you could start stacking it up because you can take back in now with a new CBA $7.5 million more in a contract if that contract is between, I think, $7 and $30 million. So you could start doing the thing where you send a guy out, bring back in a guy who makes more, then send that guy out. Maybe you could stair-step your way to someone like Cam Johnson or someone like Andrew Wiggins. I still remain very interested in Andrew Wiggins. I think the Heat are probably going to hang on to his contract because they want it to be used for matching salary in a Kevin Durant deal. But if it turned out that he realized, listen, we're not going to make this deal, I'm still interested in trading for one of those guys. That would be a big move. A Cam Johnson, a Andrew Wiggins, a Trey Murphy III. Those would be big moves. However, I right now find myself in more of a wait-and-see approach for the Grizzlies and a patient offseason, so I don't think they will do those. All right, another question. This one's from Hudson Herndon. If the Grizzlies don't make a trade and the mid-level exception is the only way they try to upgrade the roster, would I prefer them prioritizing a wing, such as Chris Middleton, Bruce Brown, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, or a big man, such as Clint Capella and Bobby Portis? Now, to have this mid-level exception, they would have to, again, not use cap space on Jaren Jackson Jr. If they do use that cap space on Jaren Jackson Jr. for the renegotiation, you only have the room exception, which is close to $9 million. So either way, if you have $9 million or so to spend on a free agent or 14 or so to spend on a free agent, would I prefer them prioritize a wing or a big? I don't care. I think some of those guys you mentioned, like Nickeil Alexander-Walker, you're probably not going to get for like the room exception. If you had the full mid-level, maybe. I want them to sign a useful player to a good contract. That's it. I don't think Chris Middleton is going to be available. I think he's going to opt into his money. Could you get Bruce Brown? I don't like the Bruce Brown fit, frankly, for the Grizzlies. He's another undersized guy, not a great shooter. I don't mind getting a center like Clint Capella or a scorer, rebounding big like Bobby Portis. That's fine with me, but those are older guys. Mainly, I want them to get a player who will help on the court, which, again, Capella or Portis could be that guy. But I want them to sign a useful player to a good contract, because once you do that, that becomes an asset. Now, I think probably with a younger player, you have a better chance of that being an asset. But I got to tell you, the free agents this offseason, there's not many good ones. Even if you look at the wings, there really are not that many good wings available. I mean, we're talking like, are you interested in trying to get Gary Trent Jr., who seems a little bit superfluous with your current roster? I mean, could you get Malik Beasley after his great season? I mean, you'd be paying premium prices off Malik Beasley's great last year he had. I mean, we're talking Taurean Prince. The guys aren't out there. I mean, of course, you want to try to hit the home run of the guy who's going to make a big leap. That's why I think a lot of people are pointing to a guy like Nickeil Alexander-Walker. But, like, it's hard to nail that talent exactly. But I do think if they make a signing this year, basically you want to get some salary that you can match in potential trades. But you just want to get a guy who, once you sign him to that contract, people say that's a fair contract. Thus, you can trade him for something later. Or if not, the player just helps you on the court. Moises Laura asks, do you think the Grizzlies might do some cap magic this summer, like re-signing Bagley using his cap hold to make trades for rotation players? Do you think they go for a big swing? Are they pressured to pay the luxury tax? A lot of questions there from Moises. Let's start with the easy one first. The end of the question, are they pressured to pay the luxury tax? No, I don't think they feel any pressure whatsoever to pay the luxury tax. I don't know where the pressure would come from. From me? I mean, they don't care what I say. From the fans, I don't think fans apply that pressure. I think fans league-wide have mostly been kept somewhat docile by the continual narratives about luxury tax payments and the aprons. And you've gotten to this situation where when fans talk about their teams, they say things like, oh, I don't think we need to be a luxury tax team, which I think is a bizarre position for any fan to ever be in, to say, I like it when my owner doesn't spend money. So I think there's been this like PR blitz for years now that have gotten a lot of fans to just understand that, oh, that's expensive to pay for this guy. We shouldn't have to do it. So no, I don't think there's any pressure whatsoever on the Grizzlies front office to pay the luxury tax. Will they do cap magic this summer? Yeah, they very well could. They could do that thing I was talking about where maybe they use a trade exception to bring in a guy making some amount of money and then trade that player for someone making even more money. If that counts as cap magic, sure. Are they going to do cap magic using Marvin Bagley's cap hold? I'd be stunned. I think that's one of the least likely ways that they would use quote unquote cap magic. Mainly, first of all, because we think they're going to try to renegotiate and extend Jaren, meaning they would have to renounce Marvin Bagley's cap hold. Even if they didn't do that, if they decided to take Jaren Jackson Jr. into free agency next year, or if Jaren again states, I'm going to wait, I'm going to go into free agency next year, I want to try to make the Supermax again, whatever. He decides he's not going to sign an extension. Even then, I don't think the Grizzlies are going to do something where they sign Marvin Bagley to $10 million for next season and then use that as matching salary, just because I don't think other teams want to pay Marvin Bagley $10 million. So I think that's very, very low on my list. And then again, the middle of the question from Moises was, do I think they make a big swing? I don't. I've been through it. I don't think a Durant trade or a Giannis trade makes a ton of sense for them right now. Let's do 2 more questions, and I'll do those right after this short break. All right, Occasional Poster asks, could Ja's body withstand an entire playoffs finals run as the number 1 option? Who am I to say that his body can't hold up? I think most of us would say that the rigors of the game, the increased injuries league-wide, and Ja's somewhat frail frame and dangerous playing style means no, every single year it seems very unlikely that he would make it through an entire finals run uninjured. I feel like as fans, we're hoping for the perfect set of circumstances where he stays upright for an entire playoffs run, but it seems like it's unlikely. He gets banged up a lot, and maybe it's just bad luck. So I don't know. I'm not a medical expert. I have no idea, but of course, I'm leaning towards saying, no, I don't think his body can withstand it. But again, I don't know what I'm talking about. So I could just be wrong there. Riria, I don't know if I'm saying that right. Apologies if I'm missing that. Ryria91 asks, where would a core of just Zach Edey, Jaylen Wells, and GG Jackson rank amongst the super young cores of rebuilding teams? This is a really interesting question. The Grizzlies are not, of course, a rebuilding team. But if they were, where would their young core of just Zach Edey, Jaylen Wells, and GG Jackson rank among the young cores of rebuilding teams? I don't think most of you are going to love my answer here. I don't think it ranks very high. If we just talk about the rebuilding teams, that of course narrows it down. There are a few I think they're clearly better than. I also don't know exactly how to define what the young cores are. Could we include, as the Grizzlies, Scottie Pippen Jr. in this? He's a year older than Zach Edey. Are we only talking about players who are 23 or younger on other teams? I don't know. First of all, let's start trying to define maybe the value of our own players. I think it's interesting, and I was asking some of the Patreon supporters over at patreon.com/fastbreakbreakfast. I think it's interesting to wonder what Zach Edey's value is league-wide right now. Could you trade Zach Edey to get into the first round of this year's draft if you wanted to? Not saying we want to. But I don't think you could get a top 15 pick from anyone in this year's draft for Zach Edey right now. I could be wrong there. But my impression is there are numerous teams in the NBA who weren't even that interested in Zach Edey and aren't interested in him right now, just period. They don't think he's the type of center they want on their roster. There then is probably a more important point that everyone values the draft pick before they use it more than the actual player once you see the player. My impression of Zach Edey last year was that he's not a very high ceiling player, and I could be wrong. I get my analysis wrong all the time of first year players. I look at a rookie and I'm like, nope, not that into him, and then they turn out to be amazing. But my thought would be a lot of teams, if you're drafting in the lottery, say, your dreams of what that lottery pick could become are usually always greater than a guy who's played a season in the NBA and you're like, yeah, Jaylen Wells was great, but I'm not giving up the 10th pick for him because the 10th pick could be anything. It could be Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. It could be Devin Booker, that type of thing. So if you're trying to figure out what you could trade for guys, I don't know. And I'm using that as an example, trying to figure out what value the Grizzlies' young core has right now. Like Jaylen Wells, you could probably trade him maybe for a first-round pick. He's a solid role player. Also, I think probably a rather low ceiling relative to what you might hope for when you're making a first-round draft pick. Now, when you're making a second-round draft pick, I mean, you hope to get a rotation player like Jaylen Wells. But to be clear, you're also, deep down, teams are hoping, what if we get an all-star with this pick right here? G.G. Jackson's value is interesting. I had a pretty well-known draft expert last summer say G.G. Jackson would have been a top 10 pick if he was in last year's draft. Now, right now, he wouldn't be drafted high at all. And also, I don't think he has much trade value league-wide. I think Gigi's lost season and just the overall feeling around him league-wide, it's really tanked over the last season. Now, remember, he was only available for the Grizzlies in the second round because of all of the negative reports about his attitude, because of his bad reputation. I don't know if it's fair or not, but those whispers have grown louder. The talk about his immaturity has really ramped up based off of last season. Him getting sent to the G League at the end of the year. Him not going on that last road trip that Taylor Jenkins went on. That was weird. It was strange. And his inability to get on the court and to help the team on the court, him being horrible at defense, I don't know what his value is. So all of that to say, I am not the highest on those players that Riria asks about in this question. But that being said, I think clearly those three guys, and even if you include Scottie Pippen Jr. as a fourth guy, I think clearly that young core is better than a handful of teams that you'd call rebuilding teams. It's better than like the Nets. They don't have basically any like players you're that excited about. Like what's the Nets core? Does Keon Johnson count? I think you could say maybe it's on par with the Raptors. I mean, maybe that's eye of the beholder, and a lot of this is going to be eye of the beholder. Would a Raptors fan trade Grady Dick, Jacoby Walter, and Jamal Shed for our guys? I doubt it, but maybe. I think it's much worse than a lot of other teams. I guess we can talk about the rebuilding teams that I think it's much worse than, like the Wizards. They have a much better young core with Koulibaly and Sarr and Bub Carrington, and then the sixth pick on this year's draft. Also, Justin Champagnie, I'm a huge fan of. The Trailblazers, they have a much better young core. I mean, Scoot Henderson, Donovan Clingan, Shaden Sharp. I mean, does Denny Avdia count? He's 24. He's a year older than Zach Edey. Also, they get a top 10 pick. The Hornets core, it's probably better just based on Brandon Miller, because I think Brandon Miller at least has some all-star upside. I am not convinced any of the Grizzlies young players that we've talked about have all-star upside. The rest of the Hornets young core, they don't have much. I mean, Tijan Salon didn't show much. Does Mark Williams count? Also, that's another question there. The Jazz don't have a lot as far as their young core. They have a lot of young guys, but none of them are that promising, relatively speaking. I mean, I guess Isaiah Collier had a good year. Keontae George is a solid player. And Kyle Filipowski was all right last year. So maybe, if you include that and this year's fifth pick, you'd say they have a better young core. That might, again, be an eye of the beholder thing. Of course, I'm not including Walker Kessler. If you include Walker Kessler, advantage Jazz right there. Cody Williams was awful last year as a rookie. Taylor Hendricks has shown nothing. I'm trying to go through some other rebuilding teams. I mean, the Pelicans, maybe the Grizzlies have a better young core than the Pelicans. They don't have a whole lot going on if we count them as rebuilding. I mean, the Suns technically going to be rebuilding. The Grizzlies have a better young core than the Suns. Do the Bulls count? Are the Bulls rebuilding? I don't know. They've got, I think the Grizzlies right now have a better young core than the Bulls, who mainly just have Modest Buzelis to talk about. So it's a fun question, but I don't know exactly how you would say it stacks up. Eric Madigan asks, and this will be the last question for today's episode. If we wanted to trade Vince Williams Jr., G.G. Jackson, or Jaylen Wells, which one would you trade, keeping in mind their trade value? Eric says, I'd assume it'd go Jaylen, G.G., Vince Williams from most valuable to least valuable. It's a great question, Eric, and it's a hard one to answer. I think right now, league-wide, Vince Williams Jr. might have more value than G.G. Jackson, frankly. Maybe someone is interested in the upside, the tantalizing upside. All the physical gifts belong to G.G. Jackson. I mean, also, G.G. looked great in Summer League. I remember being so excited with how well he was rebounding, that his physical frame seemed to be superior to the other guys he was going against. And maybe that's just like the downside of analyzing Summer League. But we were looking for Gigi to contribute, not just scoring. We figured he could put the ball in the basket, but can he do the other things? Can he use his size to be a dominant interior player? And in Summer League, he did. So that just goes to show, I guess, how disappointing this year was. Of course, he was injured for a lot of it. But if we wanted to trade Vince, Gigi, or Jaylen Wells, which one would I trade, keeping in mind their trade value? Here's the controversial thing. I mean, it's all dependent on what you could get. You probably want to trade the guy who has the most trade value. Possibly. Like, Jaylen Wells has the most trade value of those players. Would you say he's at the peak of his trade value, like for his career? It's possible. This might be it. First team all-rookie Jaylen Wells. Right now, this might be the peak of his trade value. Like, what could you get for that, though? What could you get for that makes you any better? I don't know. If you could flip him into one of those proven veterans I was talking about, I mean, I know you want to keep around the very cheap, useful, good starter Jaylen Wells when you're building your team with inexpensive Jaren Jackson Jr. and John Morant and Desmond Bane and maybe other players. But also, if I could use Jaylen Wells to bring in a guy who I've obsessed about, like a Cam Johnson, that's something I'd consider. If they thought that was a big plus in a trade package. You think about last year. I actually said this on an episode. I didn't believe it, but I said it. I talked last summer about, hey, this could be the peak of G.G. Jackson's value. People talking about him. Oh, he'd be the fifth pick in last year's draft if he was in the draft. What could you trade for him? I mean, if the Grizzlies could have traded him last offseason for something, that would look like a stroke of genius now looking back. But it's hard to make those decisions because if you're wrong, I mean, you're going to regret it. You're going to look dumb. So I don't know. I do think one of those guys gets traded. Also, I would include, or I think there's a good chance one of those three guys gets traded this offseason. Probably going to be Vince or G&G. But I do think you want to include in that Scottie Pippen Jr. Like, is this the peak of Scottie Pippen Jr.'s value? He made a name for himself in the playoffs, even if the Grizzlies lost. He had a really strong season last year. Like, these are all guys I would consider trading. And also, this goes to something that I think maybe I'm a little bit different on than everyone else. I am not super attached. I mean, emotionally, I'm a little bit attached, but I'm not super attached to all the current Grizzlies players beyond the big three. I don't want to make a big swing personally. I want to keep Desmond Bane, Jaren Jackson Jr., and John Morant. Beyond that, I'm listening. Like, they might consider, the front office probably considers Zach Edey to be a building block for the next iteration of the Grizzlies team that hopefully makes the conference finals. My mind's open. I will listen to trades for anyone outside of that big three because, again, I want to build around that big three. But that might be where I'm a little bit different. But anyways, that's all I have time for today. Thank you for your questions. If I didn't get to your question today, hopefully I will get to it in a future episode. Anyways, thanks for listening. If you want to support my show, get more content from me, if you want to join the listener Slack, that's at patreon.com/fastbreakbreakfast. All right. You guys have a great day. I'll talk to you soon. Go Grizz.